What is up? Welcome back to the Tomahawk Talk Pod. Very special episode. As always, I'm your man, Jay Money. With me, we've got Ryan and Jose, and Ben will join a little bit later on. We've got a guest coming on, CJ Nitkowski, making his second appearance on the TTP. Thoughts?
I mean, God bless CJ for liking us enough to come back a second time.
Jose couldn't have said it any better. CJ, thank you for coming on. We very much appreciate it, my friend.
I think if he actually listened to the pod, he would definitely be like, I don't think I'm going to come back on.
These people. It's legit what he would say.
Really excited to talk to CJ. I think we're going to go over some great points. We're going to go over the Yastrzemski and Suarez signings, probably the Walt hire, and, just talk some ball with him. So really excited for this episode. And yeah, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Share it with everybody. We really appreciate all of our listeners and everything. And without further ado, here is CJ. All right, we're here with CJ. CJ, how's it going, man? How is the offseason treating you?
Off-season's been great, man. I mean, they always feel slow, which gets, I try to tell myself, enjoy it while you can, because the chaos is going to be here. But I also was thinking, actually, earlier today, there was a part of me that was kind of yearning to be at spring training, and I had to, shake myself. I'm like, stop saying that, because, as much as I love it, enjoy the time while you get it at home with your family. So things are good, man. It's been a good off-season. It's been a really good off-season for the Braves here over this past week or so, and getting excited for spring training.
Absolutely. You just touched on it. Just signed two guys. What are the thoughts?
Yeah, it was exciting, right? We love seeing the blue square. I really like when information doesn't get out early. I think Passan might have had Suarez 5 minutes before the Braves announced it, and it's what's the point? They're going to announce it anyway. They're tough to beat. No, it was good, man. It was good to see. The Suarez part of it. I wondered with Raisel Iglesias signing back and getting the 1-year deal, and then when they didn't pick up the options for Pierce Johnson and for Tyler Kinley, not to say that they're not going to come back, but I thought at least Kinley, I really thought both of them were coming back. And I started to think, man, okay, there's probably got to be a little bit more coming on the bullpen side. And, man, Suarez, I'm thinking as a closer, I wasn't sure if we actually were going to have a shot at him. And then you hear what he has to say and how unselfish he is about the entire thing. Obviously, it was a really healthy contract and a tough one to turn down, but it was an amazing ad, especially, too, unfortunately, we're kind of getting the feeling that maybe Joe Jimenez is not going to be ready. We missed him so much last year, so that's a little bit discouraging. So, you got to build that bullpen up really deep. So I was excited. I was excited to see them be aggressive and go after a really good pitcher with a big-time arm. He's very kind of somewhat similar to Raisel. He throws a little bit harder, right, but it's fastball changeup, and he's a strike thrower, and he's been in big moments, and he's got a very interesting career path. So that was a great signing. I had thought all along on the bat side that they would be looking for a right-handed bat, but I'll take Mike Yastrzemski all day long. We had him on our radio show on XM a couple of days ago. He was fantastic. I've always liked watching him play, and one of the things we brought up with him is just he's a gamer, man. He's kind of a guy's guy kind of player. I've always felt like that from the other side or just watching him when I'm calling games, so I love having him now in our clubhouse. And you're starting to see how it might work as far as, say, maybe DHing or maybe Profar DHing early on and Mike Yastrzemski out in the outfield. But I just love seeing the aggressiveness. I love seeing the guys that want to be here in the worst way. They talk about the culture and excited to join the club. And those are two really good moves. I hope we're not done just yet. But those were a couple of great moves this past week or so.
Absolutely. It came out that Yastrzemski actually cut AA off during the meeting. How do you think he's going to fit in the clubhouse? Because that seems kind of perfect.
Yeah, no, I loved it. And it was obviously in a respectful way, but it was essentially while they were trying to give him their sales pitch on how he was going to fit in. And he stressed, he was very honest about, first of all, he's a winning player first, right? He definitely puts a team before himself. But he was also honest about the fact that, hey, you know what? I have a second year. I'm not coming here to play for 1 year to try to up my value and then hit free agency again. I know where I'm going to be the next 2 years, so you don't have to explain to me anything or feel like you owe me anything as far as what my role is going to look like. He had heard a lot of good things about the organization, wanted to be here. It's a really cool story about his dad. I believe his first minor league manager was Snit, which was kind of cool. He said I think he had a Bobby Cox signed glove when he was a kid, and so there's always been kind of a soft spot, I think, in his heart for the Atlanta Braves. But like you said, he didn't need an explanation, which is super refreshing in today's game. I will tell you a quick story from a few years ago. I won't say the guy's name, but probably more than a few years ago. But I was talking to a manager who had a really healthy, really good big league career. And he said to me one day, it's like, CJ, man, the thing that drives me crazy are these meetings and explanations that I have to give players about playing time. He's like, I got a guy walk in my office. He's 4 for his last 50, and he's wondering why he's not in the starting lineup. And he's like, I got to explain that to him, right? And so now you get the absolute opposite here with Mike Yastrzemski. He's like, yeah, just whatever. Let me know. I'll be there, whatever it takes. So he hasn't DH'd much in his career. And I did ask him about that. I think it's only been like 6 starts. And some guys do struggle with the DH role because they like being engaged and being in all the time, flow of the game, all that kind of stuff. And he was honest. He said, yeah, I'm definitely kind of that guy, but, I'll do what I got to do to figure it out.
Looking back at a lot of Yaz's Savant page and whatnot, it seems like he's been a above average defender in the outfield for the majority of his career. And then with him being able to cycle with maybe giving Ronald a day off at the D, or maybe letting Ronald go to DH, or letting Profar DH, because I like Profar, but we all know he's not going to make the most plays out in left field. But with Yaz being a Deadpool hitter and mashing right-handers, I think he had over 800 OPS against righties last year. What do you think? How do you think that he's going to add to this lineup and really, I guess, explain to the average listener who doesn't keep up with Royals or Giants baseball what Yaz can bring to a ball club?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right? The flexibility to play all the outfield positions if he needs to. Probably at this point in his career, at 35 years old, the corners are going to be better suited for him. Not that you couldn't put him in center if you had to. In a pinch, obviously, Eli White also would be able to do that as well if you kind of needed a spot, needed somebody to play center field. And you're right. I'm not going to disagree with you on Profar. He did make that pretty amazing play, though, last year when he robbed that homer, which was awesome. But there was also some other plays and could be a little bit better out there. The other thing that I heard Alex Anthopoulos actually talking on MLB Network Radio on Sunday that he brought up was that Sean Murphy might not be ready. And I think that was the first time I heard that. If I'm not mistaken, or at least that he alluded to, that they have to be a little bit careful about that. And what that would mean is that Mike Yastrzemski is probably your opening day left fielder, and Profar is going to DH, kind of for the exact reasons that you just laid out there. And of course, that also means a little bit more of a workload for Drake Baldwin. When it comes to Ronald, if you guys remember, he never wanted to come out of the game, right? He's never that guy. He really couldn't DH, and when you have a guy like Marcell Ozuna or a Kyle Schwarber type or Shohei Ohtani, that actually puts teams sometimes in a tough spot because they can't give guys a day where they can only just take their 4 or 5 plate appearances and kind of get them off their feet in the field. I think the Braves are probably smart to now approach the DH position the way that they are for the exact reason you're talking about. Remember Ronald last year at times didn't quite look the same running in the outfield. Now, so far in winter ball where he's stealing bases again, he looks really good. We know how much he loves to play the game. But I thought there were times last year that he actually probably could have been DHing, especially when he would go toward the wall and maybe chasing a ball and it ended up in the stands. But kind of watching him break it down and try to slow down, it looked like he was favoring his leg. And there was that one game he did not want to come out. And Stint was like, come on, man, we got to get you out of here. Like, he didn't quite look completely right. So now if he needs a day or two, you can give him that day or two, and you can do it without losing his bat. And that's big. And so I'm with you on that one, right? I think it was something they were going to do. They didn't make it seem like it was a priority finding that other outfielder, but it ended up becoming a great opportunity to bring Yastrzemski in here. So you're exactly right. And it's important. It's important to be able to keep your best bats in the lineup while either taking them out of the field because they're not that good defensively or just because they could use a day here and there.
And honestly, that's what I loved hearing the most about Yastrzemski on your radio show. Talk about a guy who just gets it, like coming to the Braves and knowing what his role is going to be, not just being a DH, but also filling in all 3 outfield spots when needed, knowing what he's coming into and genuinely sounding excited about it coming into the Braves. So really, really loved listening to your interview with him because he just sounds like a really, really awesome guy that we're going to love here in Atlanta. So If any of you guys haven't heard that interview, please, I beg you to go listen to it because Mike Yastrzemski won me over like that.
Same. Yeah, and I have it on my Twitter account. Obviously, the show that I'm on is on Sirius XM, so it's behind a paywall and it's on the app. But whenever there's a good interview or a soundbite, either they send it or they'll post it. But I took the whole interview and posted it, so I have it on my X account up there. But you're right, man. I'm the same way. Like, I always liked him from the outside, but never really talked to him very much. And kind of going through that interview, listening to him talk about how his dad kind of taught him to be that guy and what it meant to play winning baseball. His father played a couple of years in the minor leagues, unfortunately passed away at an early age. But, there were some lessons that he instilled in him about what it takes to really be a legitimate, true baseball player that your teammates are going to respect, how you best carry yourself, where your focus really should be. Of course, his grandfather is a legend in our game, certainly is with the Boston Red Sox. So he's picked up on those things, right? It's not automatic just because you grow up in a baseball family that you're going to get those little things that matter the most. But to just hear him continually talk about the focus on winning, keeping the focus on the team, the other stuff's going to fall into place for a guy that took a long time to get to the big leagues, right? You go back and you mentioned looking at his baseball reference page. It took him a while, right? It didn't go exactly the way that he thought it was going to go for him, but it ended up obviously working out really well, and he's got great perspective. He gets it.
Well, getting into the other fun free agent signing, I think we were all on this dude early on. I wanted Suarez early on, but main reason for me is because we just didn't have, now Iggy throws pretty good, but we just didn't have that dude that threw 100 miles an hour in the bullpen that you get that swing and miss stuff consistently. What do you think that dimension is going to look like in the Atlanta pen?
Yeah, it's going to be big, right? And he's also a pretty good ground ball pitcher. The ground ball rate went down a little bit, but he uses his fastball. He knows how to use his fastball, right? He's fastball first, where Iggy's probably changeup first, right? I mean, Iggy knows how to use his fastball. It's not nearly the same velocity that you're getting with Suarez. And so while your first instinct might be like, hey, similar repertoire, it is different the way that they use it. So I'm not worried about those guys necessarily going back to back. I think the big thing with Rysel wanting to be back here, he know obviously how the year went, or at least how it started then compared to how it finished, that he would come here on a one-year deal. I think really speaks to kind of a lot of what we talk about as far as getting the right people in the clubhouse. Those guys are going to work well together. The fact that Suarez does not care about closing after having 40 saves last year, I think he's got the most saves the last couple of years, if I'm not mistaken, in the National League, or he's right there. And the fact that he's like, yeah, whatever, what do you want me to do? You know, because he'd heard so many good things about the team. He'd look forward to playing with Rysel as well. It is nice to have that big power arm. And listening to a guy like Mike Yastrzemski talking about how great it's going to be not to face him anymore, right? A guy that he had seen a good amount because they were playing in the same division for a few years, right? So that kind of speaks to it, right? There's something about opponents, especially opponents that see a guy quite a bit and understand how difficult he is to hit and what it means. And now it's nice to be on that same team here for both of those guys in the Braves. So it was a good one. I didn't know where the numbers were going to go. It sounds like maybe the Braves pushed it over the line by adding that third year. And you never know what's completely accurate and what's not, but kind of reading some of the insiders, you got the impression that there was a lot of two-year deal offers out there for him, and the 3-year at a place that he saw really inviting ultimately ended up making it happen.
If that's the case, that is music to Braves fans' ears everywhere, because the biggest thing I've seen on Twitter everywhere is Alex's resistance to adding an extra year onto contracts. And like, people, obviously nobody knows the ins and outs better than the front office, you know, but everywhere I look on Twitter, people are like, well, why didn't he give so-and-so the extra year? Why didn't he do this? It's like, because it's business. Yeah, at the end of the day, it's business. You got to do what's best for business. I don't know, saying that he ponied up for the extra year, that's going to shut a lot of folks up that are complaining about it.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, we got to be careful, right? We all do it. We all watch. We all kind of listen in as far as how often we pay attention to what people are saying on social media. I get it, right? There's a lot of attention out there, and there's a lot going on, and people want to share their opinions, which is fine. But at the end of the day, listen, it is business, and generally that is a smart move, right? I mean, go look at some of the biggest contracts in baseball or some of those longer contracts, and what you're going to notice is some deals you probably wouldn't want to get stuck with, right? They've been incredibly disciplined with what they have done. It's not easy to do. And we heard Terry McGurk at the last shareholders meeting talking about how he believes this team could be a top 5 payroll team. You got to be careful, of course, how you spend that money and trying the best you can to put your team in a place where they can continually compete. It's tough to do. Like even the Dodgers, obviously the Dodgers have all the money in the world, but they're spending over their mistakes, right? It's not like they're just spending really well. And I say mistakes just when they don't get production. The two examples I can use now is Chris Taylor. If you remember Chris Taylor, kind of that utility guy, had a pretty healthy contract. He started to struggle. Tommy Edman is somewhat kind of the same player, and they just gave a deal to him. Right, they just kind of paid right over the one that wasn't working out by giving another one. Tanner Scott was the biggest reliever out on the market last year, and the Dodgers went out and got him, and they got Kirby Yates, which, you know, at the time when they had gotten Tanner Scott, I was like, well, that means they're not getting Yates, and they did. And it's not even, you know, here we are a year later, and now they have Edwin Diaz. They spent like $186 million in their bullpen the last 2 years. It's crazy.
Must be nice.
On just on 4 guys. Throw Blake Trinan in there. Those 4, when you add up all the years of the contract and the dollars, $186 million. They're spending over their mistakes. Most teams can't make those mistakes. They're not going to be able to pay over them. And a lot of times those mistakes are because the contracts are too long, or you just misread, or you paid over market because you really wanted to get the player. I think Alex has done a really good job showing restraint. Sure, we all want to see action all the time. But the reality is this roster's in a good spot, man. I mean, we talked about it a lot down the stretch, even though the team wasn't going to the postseason and run seemed like it was coming to an end. It wasn't a run that was coming to an end with a roster you were like, man, oh no. Like, what are we going to do? We got a bunch of old guys that are on the back end of contracts that are making a lot of money. That is not this team. And that's what you try to do the best that you possibly can. It's really hard. And so that's where kind of that restraint has to come in. We all want to spend money that's not ours. But Alex Anthopoulos has somebody to answer to if he spends it in a poor way. And I think he's done a good job. Andrew's in a good spot. It's been good additions. And we'll see where the next one's going to be. I do. I think Dylan Lee absolutely could be that guy. The question becomes, do you want to go even a little bit further? Because as we know, right, with relievers, there is inconsistency at times year over year. We saw with Rysel the first couple of months of the season last year. And so you always want to be as deep as you possibly can in your bullpen. We'll see. I don't know if they've engaged at all with even Pierce Johnson or with Tyler Kinley. I mean, Tyler Kinley as a Brave was unbelievable, right? He started using that slider a little bit more. It was very interesting to listen to him talk about that slider, the way that he uses it and makes it look a little bit different, even though technically it's the same pitch. He obviously was very comfortable here, so that could be a name. I would take Tyler Kinley over Ryan Stanek. Not that I wouldn't take Stanek. Stanek might be a little bit cheaper, but there are still some pretty good arms out there. Most of the closers have come off the board. What's interesting about Brad Keller, we had him on probably 3 or 4 weeks ago, and he would love to be an Atlanta Brave, right? He said it without saying it, the best he could in free agency without tipping your hand too much. But he could also start. Remember, he had been a starter. He very well could be one of those guys that went into the bullpen like Ronaldo, came back out and into the rotation again, right? Or there's been a lot of great examples. Seth Lugo, we saw with Clay Holmes with the Mets last year, even though he really had never started much in his career. So Keller would give you that kind of flexibility and does seem like he'd be a pretty good fit here with the Braves. I do think, though, now that the market is starting to take off the way that it is, it only helps his value because there's less pieces available and teams could look at him as a potential 8th or even 9th inning arm. And after the money that Rogers just got with the Blue Jays, which was crazy. I mean, that was crazy. Like, his predictions were like 2 for 15, 2 for 15. He got 37 for 3. That was wild. So he's probably sitting back a little bit more and going, okay, that's a name off the board, and my value's probably gone up. Now, he didn't say that he necessarily wanted to go to a place where he had to start. I think he was at least saying the right thing publicly. I don't know how strongly he feels about it, and not to say that he couldn't find himself a spot in the rotation either with the Braves, but he could be a guy. I mean, I'd take him all day long. It's a 3-year contract guy that would kind of fit in line, a little bit less than probably what Suarez got, maybe similar to what Ronaldo got the first time before they restructured his deal, because there could be some similarities there. But I like him. But there's still a handful of pretty decent names out there when it comes to relievers. So lots of different ways to go. And let's hope at least that Joe Jimenez is back by May or June. I'm sure we'll get a little bit more updated as we get closer to spring.
So now that the Braves have gone out and gotten Suarez and Yastrzemski, do you have any other players on your radar? Anyone you're personally hoping that the Braves go out and get?
So shortstop is still really interesting, right? After they had gotten Yastrzemski, I wondered if that meant Dubon's going to be the everyday shortstop. And Alex talked about that on Sunday on MLB Network Radio a little bit. But, you know, we got to do the best we can, right? These guys are such pros. To be able to almost read into their tone or read between the lines, it's not easy to do with him. But it's a fun game. And it's why I don't ask too many questions, because I want to play that game a little bit with the executives and during the interviews. Based on my guessing of his tone, and he had said that they'd be perfectly fine with Mauricio Dubon as their shortstop, I think it is their absolute backup plan if they can't get whatever they're working on right now. The other thing Alex said, he said this has been one of the more active Decembers that he has seen in a while. The conversations that are happening between teams regarding potential trades have picked up significantly. There are some pretty good trade candidates out there. When we first got to the offseason, I put a little wish list together. I put Hassan Kim at the top of that as far as the shortstop position went. But then I kind of threw a couple of long balls, a couple of Hail Marys, and threw Jeremy Pena and Corey Seager in there because I think they both could be potential trade candidates, even though Dana Brown had said there's no way they're trading Jeremy Pena. He's 2 years away from free agency, and they got a ton of infielders over there right now. And they would get a haul in return. And I think the Braves actually could match up. I don't know if that's even available. You know, Dana Brown threw some cold water on it, but you never know. And then I mentioned, of course, Corey Seager. What I come to find out later, which was hugely disappointing, was that Corey Seager, he has 8 teams on his no-trade list, and the Braves are one. I was shocked when I had heard that. Now, he's a North Carolina guy. I mean, he might be one of those guys that actually doesn't want to be too close to home. It's possible. I loved covering him. He's one of my favorite hitters to watch, hit and play, and he still can hold down the shortstop position. I think you get a little discount on what's left on the contract, but that also might be another Hail Mary. You have Tovar in Colorado, could be a possibility. Lawler in Arizona, who's never really gotten regular time at short because he can't get it with the Diamondbacks. He might play some third. They talked about him maybe being the outfield. I don't know how they feel about him as a potential trade candidate. So there's a couple out there for sure. It'd be perfectly fine if Ha-Seong Kim ended up coming back to the Atlanta Braves. We heard how much he loved it here and would be a really good fit again. So I don't know. But the shortstop position to me is probably the one that I find most intriguing because absolutely nothing could happen or something really big could happen. And either way, you're still going to feel really good about your team. If it's not shortstop, the other thing that Alex brought up today, and he brought it up a couple of weeks ago as well, was regarding the rotation. And I found it very interesting at the end of the year that he had brought up starting pitching as a priority. And I was looking at our roster, I'm like, well, if Holmes is back and healthy, Schwellenbach's going to be back and healthy, if Ronaldo's back and healthy, to go along with what you already have, right, with Chris Sale and Spencer Strider and kind of the depth of rotation, I wonder why they would be interested in starting pitching. He has kind of amended that since, and what he had said today was those guys are all doing really well. Both Grant Holmes and Bryce Elder are out of options, so those are guys that are going to have to be on the big league roster or traded, and I don't think Grant Holmes is going anywhere. But it's good to see that they're healthy and feeling good, and so they don't feel nearly as much pressure, I guess is kind of the point, to add a starting pitcher. And the phrase he used today, he covered it all today. The phrase he used, which was funny to me, he said, unless we find a pitcher that we believe could make postseason starts. But then he said, or if we just need also someone to help out, right? So it was kind of like, that covers everybody. But I thought it was an interesting thing that he said, like if they feel like the big move is there, the guy that they really like, there's not very many of the good ones left. Obviously with Cease off the board, I did have Ranger Suarez on my list. I would take him all day long. He's a little bit of a complicated case because he's never thrown a ton of innings. Right, I think he's been over 150 innings maybe twice in his career in the regular season. I don't think he's ever seen 160, but he's really good. He's been a thorn in the side, certainly of the Atlanta Braves. I love the way he carries himself, even though it's annoying when he's wearing a different uniform because there's some arrogance to him, right? I mean, there's some casualness to him, but I'd also take him on my team all day long. So I'd be really exciting if we do something like that. But I think, again, because a lot of the big names like Dylan Cease and others are coming off the board, he might start to get a little bit too expensive. Now, Framber Valdez is still out there. I'm a little mixed on him. He's good when he's right. We all saw what happened last year with him and Caratini. Was it Caratini? No, it was a young catcher it happened with. But yeah, it just the whole thing was just it just puts a little bit of a pause there, right? So we'll see, but there's a lot of different ways to go. And I don't know, I was actually looking in the media guide today, just seeing who kind of covers the Pacific Rim for us, because that Imai guy who's coming over from Japan, who basically said he wants to shove it up the Dodgers' ass. I'm like, okay, yeah.
Come home to Atlanta.
Yeah, and he's been amazing. So I don't know where we are in the Japanese market, and he's going to be an expensive guy as well. But there's a lot of different ways that they could go. If there's one, I guess it comes down to if there was one big move left, like one that's going to, like we're all going to get, really excited, and it's going to be a little expensive, I'd probably want it to be shortstop.
I think shortstop would be the best option to make that big move at, because you look at the minor leagues and we have a lot of pitching talent at the upper levels of the minor leagues. Like you have a guy like J.R. Ritchie, who is basically knocking on the door at this point of the major leagues. And I don't know. I mean, obviously you're plugged into the Braves and whatnot. What do you think about a guy like J.R. Ritchie? And do you think he has a chance to come up to the majors and produce in the back end of the rotation as soon as this year?
Yeah, so we saw him last year in I believe it was the prospect game, if I'm not mistaken. Anything is possible. Guys are close. I'll be very honest with you. So when it comes to the minor league guys, of course we know who the names are, and I listen to what people are saying. I trust more the people that cover the minor leagues a little bit closer than I do, because I don't cover it that closely, because there's a lot of times, unfortunately, that most don't make it, or most don't stick, or most don't stay in your organization, right? As a guy gets closer, or he's getting the call, it doesn't take long to figure out pretty quickly what you think you have, and then you see how it plays out, right? We saw it with Hurston Waldrop a couple of years ago. We saw it with Spencer Schwellenbach. I didn't know a ton about those guys coming in, especially because we were only doing 4 spring training games on TV, and it was toward the end of spring. So most of those guys were not even in camp anymore, so we didn't even get a look at them. The other guy, though, that I thought was interesting today that Alex brought up was Owen Murphy.
Yes.
The ended the interview saying, I would not be surprised if we saw him in Atlanta this year. I was like, oh. Now, he was only in A-ball last year, and he obviously missed some time, but they seem to really, really like him a lot. Big-time athlete, fills up the strike zone, generate swing and miss. Now he's got to get his first real test because he's going to very likely start the year at Double-A. And Alex said something that I've long believed in. It's not to say that I don't believe in a prospect until this point, but I'm not even really thinking much about anybody until they get to Double-A. Right, yeah. Double-A is kind of your first test. Now, things have changed, certainly since I first broke in and was in Double-A in 1994, because the minor leagues, there's a bigger gap than ever. This is what a lot of scouts will tell us. There's a bigger gap now in the minor leagues, even from Triple-A to the big leagues, than there ever has been. And that's because, of course, the game has gotten a lot younger. It's gotten a lot younger in the minor leagues. Not too many teams are going to have their, cast of 30-year-old plus guys that have big league time that can come help out in a pinch. You still have them, but you don't have nearly as many. So because the game has gotten younger, there's not nearly as much discipline when it comes to the pitching and hitting, so a little bit harder to get the read. The talent is unbelievable, especially the raw talent, but it's a little bit of a different feel. So Double-A is that absolute first test for a lot of these guys that we'll see. And once you get pretty close to me dominating that level, then we're going to start getting serious about who you think can help you. I don't know if you ever track this or not, but the Seattle Mariners are always interesting in the way that they treat their minor league pitchers. They've done a really nice job with who they've developed, but because they're in the PCL, which is an unbelievably great place to hit, and it's really tough to put up numbers for pitchers, is that a lot of times their pitchers will skip AAA because they don't want them to go there and basically get rattled. Because if you're pitching to a 4.5 or a 5 in the PCL, you're probably doing pretty good, but it doesn't compute in your head. Right, and you're looking up, and your stuff's not going to play as well because there's a lot of high-altitude cities in the PCL. Mm-hmm. So Double-A for me is where it's at for sure, and there's other organizations that believe that. The Angels were pretty aggressive calling up guys straight from Double-A, not to say that we would see that with a guy like Murphy or Ritchie, but there's definitely guys that are knocking on the door, and it's just a matter of ultimately who rises, who puts themselves in that position to get the first shot, right? That's the big thing. That's always the mindset as a minor leaguer. You come to camp and you have this dream of making a team your first big league camp. It's not going to happen because there's no room here right now unless there was just a rash of injuries and nobody wants to go through that again. But then once you get to the minor leagues, it becomes about making sure you're the first guy to get the call. And there's going to be some great competition for that this year.
And if Owen Murphy hadn't had Tommy John a couple years ago, who knows? He might already be making his major league debut last year at the tail end.
Yeah.
But
yeah, because he's 20? I think he's going to be 23 this year, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, him and Richie were drafted in the same draft. I believe it was 22, was it? Or 20? Yeah, either 21, 22. But both of those guys, I'm super excited about. I know Richie. He has a little bit higher of a floor. His stuff is really good, but I don't know if he's going to be obviously top in the rotation. But Owen Murphy, his fastball, it has some crazy spin on it. He limits weak contact really well. So, you hit on it. I'm very excited to see those guys.
And what's nice about them getting to AAA, too, is that I didn't realize this till last year, but Baseball Savant does a really good job where you can then go get data on those guys, but I think you can't get it. So it was really helpful when Fuentes got his opportunity last year. I mean, from my chair, what we do is like, you don't see these guys. When I go home, I'm usually watching West Coast games. I'm not going to tune into a minor league game. And so to be able to go there and get some quick data on the arsenal, how they used it, like you said, some of the data points that are relatable on television that you can share with people. Nice. I tried to do that today for Owen Murphy, and I was like, oh, yeah, he was only an A-ball last year, so I can't get any of that. So, yeah, it'll be nice when those guys get to the upper level so we can get some data that's shared publicly.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was good to see. Obviously, he kind of rushed to the big leagues 2 years ago and probably wasn't quite ready. I was actually having a conversation with a friend of mine the other day about him because he's a really good example, I think, for even youth pitchers and even where just the game is in general, right? The way that we look at velocity, and it's something that we talk about a lot, but there are other metrics that matter. And for Hurston Waldrop to ultimately come to that conclusion just a couple of years removed from the draft and coming out of the SEC that his fastball is not good enough, right? Even though it's a first-round fastball, his four-seamer. And I don't say that in a bad way because it's an impressive number that I certainly couldn't see when you see some of the high-end velocity from him. But he had to go learn that. And the conversations that he had with Sean Murphy, right, that was probably one of those blessings in disguise that Murph had gotten hurt last year for a couple of reasons, right, for Drake Baldwin, but then also for Murph when he was on that rehab assignment and talking to Hurston Waldrop about his repertoire. And the fact that he basically doesn't throw that four-seam fastball anymore. We knew about the split and how elite that was, and the low spin on it was incredible to see, and he had a ton of confidence in that pitch, but there is no just one pitch that you can throw in the big leagues, especially if you have, unfortunately, one of these kind of pedestrian four-seam fastballs. And so he learned from that, and he started throwing the two-seamer, and he started cutting his four-seamer, and he gets put in that spot where he had to go throw that Bristol game where there's no time to think. I was up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, get in a car, drive to Bristol, and then pitch that game, and he did really well. And even though technically he got sent down, we knew he was coming right back pretty quickly, and he did. And he went on a really nice run. And it got to the point there were certain guys when they're cruising from our chair, especially even though we're at the ballpark, when you're further removed, sometimes you almost start making assumptions. And it felt like when Hurston Waldrop was out there, he was going to get through 4 or 5 and give up maybe a run. It was just he was on cruise control for a while. Now, with that being said, there was still room for improvement. And that's the important thing as a young pitcher. He came up and he threw really well, and he showed what his stuff can do. There is room, though, to tighten it up still a little bit more, and this is where the good separate themselves from the great, right, type of thing, and that is that, yeah, you had some success. How can I get better now this year? Right? You never want to sit back and get too comfortable and feel like you have done enough. The greats will talk about that through the end of their careers, right? No matter how long they end up playing, they're constantly trying to get better, trying to stay ahead and stay on their game. So in the case of Hurston Waldrop, the one thing we'll keep an eye on this year is just tightening up that command a little bit. And not even necessarily walks, but he can spray on you here and there. Every once in a while, it'll get away from him. And again, he was great. So I don't want to take anything away from what he did last year. And sometimes the flip side of that is that good can be the enemy of great. Where if you're working too hard to be I got to be better, right? There's a balance in there somewhere that he has to find, that he should be really proud of what he did last year. But also there is some room for some areas that, especially if he wants to be at the top of rotation and his stuff could play at the top of a rotation, is that we got to tighten up that command just a little bit more. Or he could end up being that, that great Steve Avery type, right? Your fourth starter in the postseason of an unbelievable rotation. That would be even more awesome if he can pull that off. But he's in a great spot, man, and good for him, because it was tough. I know what it's like to fail at the big leagues at 22 years old. It will weigh you down. You got to be really careful. I was awful my first year, and it put me into a funk for 2 years because you really start to doubt yourself and whether or not you're capable of hanging at the highest level. And he came back the very next year, made adjustments, and showed us not only can he hang, but he can be a difference maker in the big leagues. Yeah, send out. It's a weird one. No, you're right. Listen, that's a weird one too, and I was a little bit surprised. I thought it was a little bit early. The other side of that, though, is being really honest with a guy and making sure that he's going to get his innings that he needs in spring training. I felt like it was probably a little early, but you know what? It all worked out in the end. And if it ticked him off a little bit, so be it. Whatever it was, it worked because he's in a great position now. But it does happen sometimes, and the Braves are pretty good about it. They have been. Going back to even when I was here, 20-something years ago as a player, when it comes to their spring training, at least the way, and I'm sure Walt probably carries that on, is that they, there's a lot of guys, obviously, and most are not going to make it. You got to send out, whatever it is, probably close to 30 guys, if not more, that got to go either get released or sent to minor league camp, and you really want to get focused in as soon as you possibly can on your borderline guys and making sure those guys that maybe have a chance to make the team, and it's usually in the bullpen. Sometimes it's the last spot in your bench. Maybe you're, maybe your last starter, and that there could be a competition for the fifth spot this year down the stretch. You got to make sure those guys are getting the innings that they can get. And as much as it's nice to get that big league experience in big league camp, if you're 100% certain the guy's not making the team, as cool as it is to hang out and be around those big leaguers and listen to Chris Sale and Spencer Strider talk and all the great value that comes with being in a spring training, it's also probably good to get to the minor leagues and get in your routine and get as many innings as fits into kind of getting you ready for the season.
Yeah, we're going to switch it up to the offensive side a little bit. Ozzy's coming off a couple of tough years, arguably, unfortunately, his worst career year this past year, and he's had the broken foot in 22. He had the wrist and pinky injury shortly after that. And a lot of fans are down on him, and I'm not. I love Ozzy, and I want you to kind of describe what kind of guy Ozzy is, and if you are worried about him or if you're not worried about him, and why.
Yeah, so a couple things. One is that we did see those unbelievable numbers in plate appearances that he would give against left-handed pitching kind of go down, right? That was his calling card, the way that he crushed lefties. Now, you do wonder, for quite honestly, a couple of the guys, playing through some injuries and thinking about a wrist in particular and kind of what that does to your pop. We noted about it. We noted it in the broadcast. You would start to see him pop up quite a bit. And early in counts, and his swing didn't seem like it was right. And then there was times last year we started to see it get more level and get right, and kind of that patented Ozzy Albies swing that we're used to seeing from both sides of the plate. So I think he got it right, and then he kind of slid a little bit right. There was some inconsistency there. There's no two ways about it. I had wondered how they were going to handle it. I figured they would pick up that option, especially because of the high buyout. And hopefully he's having a full, healthy offseason and comes in completely healthy. And if you start to think about the construction of this lineup and where he potentially hits, it's bottom third, maybe, 6, 7, maybe. We'll see ultimately how Walt Weiss wants to set it. So that should be a good spot for him. And as long as everybody stays healthy, I think you can keep him there and get the production that you want. So I'm not worried about Ozzy. The flip side of the other things you're kind of talking about as far as where he is personality-wise, he's a heartbeat guy. He always has been, right, when he's put this uniform on. I think others feed off of him. He is as professional as it gets, certainly from our side, on the media side. He is one of those guys that you would never know if he's having a good run at the plate or a bad run at the plate. He is the same every single day. I admire those guys because I definitely wasn't that guy. And it's impressive when you can do it, right, when you can sit there and if you don't let the weight of what's going on affect you outside of the lines, whether you're getting ready for the game, whether we're on the bus, plane, whatever it may be. So there's some real consistency, the personality that matters. And I think it's a bounce back year for him, right? There's another option year there, which is so inexpensive. I wasn't thinking that there was going to be any kind of opportunity to replace him. I didn't think it was going to be on the table. And so now it just becomes about, as long as he's healthy this year and the wrist is right and that swing stays a little bit more level, you feel good about it. He's got some chase. We know that. It always has worked. One of the things I started digging in on a little bit last year was just seeing what the production looked like outside of the strike zone. We know Michael has a somewhat similar issue at times that can really get away from him. And there's good chase and there's bad chase. But there are guys that we refer to as bad ball hitters that can put up some pretty good numbers on pitches that are outside the zone. Nobody more famous than that than Vladimir Guerrero Sr. But in the case of Ozzy, those numbers had gone down as well. I mean, they all kind of went down, right? He wasn't doing the same kind of work. I don't want to say damage. He wasn't doing a lot of damage necessarily outside the strike zone, but he was always kind of getting his hits. That had gotten away from him as well. So we'll see. But as long as he's healthy and the wrist feels good, I'm not worried about Ozzy Albies.
Speaking of Ozzy, how often, if at all, does he bring up his fish with you guys?
Well, so for us, and certainly in spring training, these are the kind of things that we like talking about. It's a matter of, if we bring it up, right? I mean, these guys are busy, man. Like the way I treat the job is that I try not to bother guys too much. There's value in having relationships or at least being able to talk to them here and there, especially on the lighter side during camp, which is nice. But he loves talking about it. And it's good to know those kind of things too, quite honestly, because, for guys that get tired of it, not that they get tired of it, but they're constantly asked about the baseball side of things. Like it's all the time. And there's a lot of guys, it's a good it's a good icebreaker, it's a good way to get them to relax, to talk about things they're passionate about. And clearly for Ozzy, it's the fish, and I'm fascinated. I learn a lot every time he talks about it.
I love learning about that stuff too, man. Just the person outside of the baseball player. Getting to know the interests, their ins and outs and things like that. I love learning about that. Speaking of that, actually, I did want to bring something up to you that I just saw on X earlier today. Drake Baldwin. So we all know he had an unbelievable year. Rookie of the Year, came in and he's just been electric for us. Something I did not know is he just graduated from Missouri State. How does someone make that happen while being a major league player?
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Obviously a little bit easier these days with the ability to finish degrees and take classes online, but good for him for wanting to do it. And it's really easy. Like most people, right, drafted my junior year, I went back to school that fall, tried to do a little bit. Back then, we just called it kind of distant learning. It wasn't really online completely, and certainly not as easy as it is now. I was doing it at one point when I was in Japan, and I was just running out of gas. I'm like, I can't stay engaged. And I stopped doing it and never graduated. And so here he is now coming off this unbelievable season that he saw it as a priority to get that degree. I can imagine how proud his mom is of him doing that. It's a good way to make the rest of us feel like we're lazy, because what a year, right? You go out, you're the Atlanta Braves catcher, you win Rookie of the Year, and oh, by the way, I'm also working on my degree at the same time. So good for him. That's amazing, capping off an incredible season. But just something I think that everybody would be really proud of. Certainly it's going to come up. Brendan, no doubt, will bring it up during the broadcast. I'm sure we'll ask him about it in spring. The one thing I noticed, too, is it felt like that mustache was looking a little thicker.
Yeah.
In those pictures at Missouri State, I was like, all right, we might be throwing it, a little old school here. It had a little 70s look to it.
You actually reminded me of I feel bad. I'm a diehard Braves fan, but for some reason I completely forgot that Walt Weiss is the new manager. I'm so used to Brian Snitker, the guy. But you said Walt Weiss. Did you play with Walt Weiss when you were in Atlanta? If even if you didn't, do you know him and could give us a little insight as to who he is or what kind of person he is?
So we never played together. I grew up in suburban New York City in a small town. It's actually like the Village. And that's where Walt Weiss is from. So he grew up probably half a mile from where I grew up. Now, he's older than I am. He was drafted, he was in high school in the late 80s, right? So, or even, no, mid 80s. And I was a 91 graduate. So I never, I always knew his name because he lived in our town. He was the biggest celebrity in our town by far. And then his dad always had, once he had gotten to the big leagues, this is, again, late 80s, so, laugh all you want. His dad had a huge satellite dish in his yard. Not like the dish, DirecTV dish. Like, this thing had to be 20 feet in diameter. And it was a small, it took up pretty much all he had in his front yard. And that was so his dad could watch his games. It was crazy, the satellite dish that he had in his yard. So that's what I think about. I can still see his house driving down. But I never had gotten a chance to meet him until after I had gotten to the big leagues. And we actually, there's meetings every year for the union, and a lot of, I don't know if they still do it anymore, but sometimes they're kind of at a destination. And nobody in the Detroit Tigers wanted to go be the player rep, so they asked me to do it. I mean, they must have been at the very end of the list. And said, hey, would you want to go to these union meetings, be the Tigers rep? I was like, sure. And I went. It was in Puerto Rico, and Walt was there. And I'm guessing he was probably there, must have been for the A's at the time, mid-90s. But that was the first time I actually met him and got to talk to him. And so it was kind of a big deal, right? Again, because he's, suffer in New York, big-time celebrity. And he said, man, he goes, CJ, he goes, I used to deliver newspapers on your street when I was a kid. Back in the day when people would ride bikes and deliver newspapers. So we actually would deliver the Journal News to my house. I didn't even know, which is kind of cool to see. So he's amazing. I'm really, really glad he got the job. I'll be honest with you, I didn't know if he had a shot. You have no idea, right? Alex does a really good job of keeping things close to the vest. He had not had a managerial hiring since he had been here with Atlanta, and everyone was wondering, would he want his own guy, right? He's obviously been around a couple of different organizations, knows a lot of different people in baseball. Was there a certain type of person? I wondered about John Gibbons because of the relationship they had. If he was going to be a candidate, did they want a young guy who was analytics driven, who maybe they could control a little bit? That's certainly a trend that we have seen in the game. I don't say that as a bad thing. I say control meaning more front office kind of influence. We certainly see that with a couple of different teams. And so I wasn't sure if he was going to get a shot, and I was absolutely thrilled to find out that he was the guy. The one thing I think we're going to learn a little bit more now that Walt is going to be in front of the microphone and answering all the questions, and you're going to be paying closer attention now to Walt Weiss, is how competitive he is. He's such a nice guy. I loved all my conversations I've had with him over the last couple of years. I always learned something. I love going to him and asking him a question, especially about infield stuff. It's great. He knows the game inside and out, but he is ultra competitive. But the biggest thing, and Alex brought it up, which I love about this, again, this roster is established. This roster is in a position to win. Last year was a down year, lack of production, lots of injuries, the PED suspension. You can't get away from it. All of those things combined led to an awful year that did not have this team in the postseason for the first time in a long time. You bring in a brand new manager. I know we've seen it with a couple of teams, so a lot of teams actually with 9 jobs being open. You got to learn your whole roster. And Walt was very honest. He said when he got the job in Colorado, he felt like he didn't really have a good grasp on that until almost the end of the year. This team does not have that kind of time. They're in too good of a spot with guys that are in their performance windows right now where they're ready to go out and win, and you don't want to have get-to-know-you moments with your manager. And so that's one thing that you don't have to worry about. Sure, he's got to get to know Mike Yastrzemski here a little bit, and Mauricio Dubon, Robert Suarez, and any other new guys that we see in uniform. But it's a handful of guys. This process is going to go much faster. There's going to be a nice familiar feeling with the guys that have been here. I don't doubt that Alex asked guys like Matt Olson and Ronald Acuna Jr. How they felt about Walt, and that would have been a smart move if he went that route. I'm guessing he probably did. And to get that nod of approval made life a lot easier, and it's going to make life a lot easier for everybody. So it's a good choice. Again, I was just concerned if he was going to get a look. I almost felt like, oh man, I wonder if didn't think it was going to happen. And then again, out of nowhere, boom, surprise, blue square, Walt Weiss is our manager. So it was great. It was great. I'm happy for him.
Good deal.
My Wi-Fi absolutely. Oh, okay. Jose, sorry, my Wi-Fi cut out. I didn't know anything and who else went, so I'm sorry. Jose, go ahead, please.
You should hear what these guys were saying about you, Jeb. It was.
Oh my! I can only imagine.
We will say whatever it is. We'll say it to his face. I promise. We'll say it to his face.
Go ahead,
I was
Jose.
just going to ask, since you touched on Walt Weiss, what can we expect from Walt Weiss, the manager?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, as I don't know if, it's hard to get a feel sometimes, the effect that a manager really has on guys. He's a professional, right? So I don't think you're necessarily going to see him embarrass anybody or lose his cool, right? I mean, he's one of those guys that is very similar to what we've seen from leadership here in the past, where it's burning on the inside but doesn't show it on the outside. I think when you're in that culture and you've been around the game a while, you understand the value of that. But I will be interested to see that first time that a call doesn't seem like it goes our way. I mean, we see less and less arguing anyway in the game because of replay. But I think you'll see a little bit more from Walt than maybe Stint over these last few years, where he's going to be barking because now it's on him, right? And he knows now. He might not think about this, but every time something happens, and Brandon and I are talking about it as, that didn't look right, that call wasn't right. That you're gonna see a shot of Walt Weiss in the dugout. They're going to be panning to him and seeing how he's reacting and whether or not he's going to be on the move. So there may be a little bit more of that, and certainly fun to watch. But again, we're never going to see another Bobby Cox anyway. But those days are kind of past us. But maybe a little bit more of that kind of energy, certainly from Walt Weiss. Again, ultra competitive. I think the big one for him, I mentioned kind of get to know you and how difficult that can be sometimes with the players when you have a new manager. There is a lot of new staff here, right? So I think the Jeremy Hefner relationship is going to be important, that they spend some time together, get a feel for how you run the bullpen. Running the bullpen for me is the toughest job for a big league manager, because it's just not easy to do, right? Because you're playing along, you're looking, you see an opportunity, you don't like getting guys up if you don't have to, but you also want to make sure you have guys ready in case you do need them, and you start to anticipate. I think that'll be probably the biggest hurdle, is finding that flow of making those decisions, and how much influence Jeremy Hefner will have on that. Will be interesting. I mean, ultimately, the manager will take it and run with it, but that'll be the big one. I think is kind of watching that. Is Walt the guy that can be talked out of staying in a game by Chris Sale or Spencer Strider? Or is he going to be a little bit more decisive when he sees what he is looking for? Is there some fatigue there? Is the fastball been up? Is he missing locations? I'm going to go get him. Or am I going to go get him and talk to him and give him a chance to read the body language? Because whenever that happens, I'm sure you guys have heard this a bunch, but a lot of times a manager will go out there, and he hasn't made the call to the bullpen because he wants to get a feel for what's going on with the pitcher. And no matter what is being said, that's not even part of the process. It's reading the body language. It's reading the tone. Does this guy really want to stay? And now we know in the case of Chris Sale, he's pretty honest. Like, if he's going to stay and you can figure it out right away. If he's done, you go ahead and you take him out. And I think he's pretty honest about that as well. But that'll be a big one. That'll be the one that probably takes the most time to get figured out. You can't rush that process. Terry Francona is going to be a Hall of Fame manager. We asked him this question last year because he comes on a radio show every week, and he told us that it's probably by the middle of May before he gets a real feel for his bullpen. It just takes time, man, even from the absolute best. It just takes time. Like, of course, we know Reisel's going to close, and Robert Suarez is probably going to set him up, and Dylan Lee's probably going to be your seventh inning guy. But it's about how many times can I get a guy up? How can I recognize when he doesn't have it that day, need to get somebody up right behind him pretty quickly? Things like that. How do they bounce back? Did the guy prefer to not pitch 3 days in a row, or prefer not to pitch back-to-back days early in the season? You don't want to overprotect guys either, because then that also makes them mad, right? There's a balance in there. So that's the part that's going to take some time. That'll be, for me, probably the most intriguing to watch.
Jeb,
How big of a nickname fan are you?
Ooh, it depends, I guess, because I do love what Baseball Reference does. So I'll use that sometimes because they seem like they have every nickname in the book. I'll do it when we have guys on, because if there's something really weird, then I'll ask them about it, if it's even legit, if you haven't heard it. So I like them. I generally don't like using them on a broadcast, for whatever that's worth. We got to be really careful, right?
Dang it!
Well, here's it's hard not to though. Because if you call that player something when you see him, that's fine. But we always have to remember that not everybody that's watching the game is a diehard, right? And so that's something that, like, Sean Murphy's up. If we're going to just refer to him as Murph, everyone could probably figure it out. But I try not to do that part. But if there's a nickname that's not necessarily associated or not easy to figure out who it is for whatever percentage of fans aren't in on it, that's the part I think that you have to be a little bit careful about. Everyone, I think, treats that on the broadcast side a little bit differently, because you want everyone to know, like, hey, this is a casual, fun conversation, but also, by the way, got to keep it a little professional too. So what do you got for me?
We have actually coined probably the best nickname of any of the Braves players. So we have started a movement, the Big Texas movement, and that would be Bryce Elder.
Yeah, just to call him Big Tex?
Yeah, Big Tex.
Yeah, I mean, it fits. It definitely fits. I think it's one of those things that probably a teammate has to pick up on it. Us introducing a nickname is dangerous. It's really dangerous, because if we miss and we piss off mom or his wife or him,
yep,
no bueno. Nobody wants to be that guy.
So, Jeb, no, that's just going to have to be an X thing, bro.
Yep, I guess so.
But you never know. If you get the right guy to pick up on it and start calling him that, it's got to be somebody in uniform that does it.
Mm-hmm. And then he does know about it.
You would feel. He does know? All right.
He does
It's
know.
It's a good one for him. I mean, he absolutely has a persona for it.
CJ, I'm gonna let you fill that out in the locker room before the season begins.
Yeah. I don't know if I want to be that guy that gets yelled at either.
Jeb's
All right,
gonna get
so-
the one host or guest
Something-
to not come back on.
Something that you had said whenever you were talking about the manager's side of everything kind of made me think about this. What is the most unbreakable record in baseball right now to you? And I'll explain how it connected to me to the managers whenever you answer.
Yeah. So I'm going to guess that your connection is Bobby's 162 ejections, probably never going to be broken. I love that it's 162, right? A full season.
Yep.
Worked out perfect. It's incredible. I think the consecutive games, I think is an easy one, especially in today's game. That'll never get broken. Cal Ripken.
56.
I hate bringing it up, man. But it's it is what it is. I mean, Barry Bonds and what he did to the home run record. I kind of hate it because it's so ridiculous, right? So the fact that both the single season and all time, those are probably safe for all the wrong reasons. I don't know about you guys, but for me, there were certain times, whether it was as a kid or even in my career, where a guy seemed like he was on pace. Maybe he had a chance with like 6 weeks to go to get to 60 or 61, and what a big deal it was. And I know we did it last year with Cal Raleigh, and we did it with Aaron Judge, at least for the American League record. But we've kind of been robbed of that.
Yeah.
So the idea of someone actually breaking the single season home run record was awesome. And then it got absolutely destroyed, unfortunately, and I think we all know why. And I hate that. I really, really hate that for our game, because there's generations now that are not going to get that of baseball fans.
Yeah. And I guess that brings me to another point, too. As somebody who pitched during the steroid era, the heart of the steroid era, how do you feel about certain players being elected into the Hall of Fame? Because I know we just had the era committee elections come by, and obviously Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens did not get in. So what are your thoughts on those guys?
Yeah, first of all, I think I deserve at least 1 full point off my career ERA. Because of it, I think that would be a fair thing to do for everybody. I'll take 2 if they're going to give them out. So, yeah, I feel pretty strongly about it. Now, we have some gray areas on some guys, but for me, if we're confident, those players do not deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. It doesn't mean we ignore them. It doesn't mean that we don't put their story in the Hall of Fame. But I think the idea of getting the highest honor of being inducted into the Hall of Fame should not be allowed. I don't buy into this guy, quote, whatever guy you want to bring up. I've heard this multiple times, was a Hall of Famer before he took steroids. You don't know when he started, right? Nobody's going to go out there and raise their hand and go, actually, I started 5 years earlier than y'all thought. Like, that's not ever going to happen.
Right.
So I don't believe in that either. As someone who played through it, someone who was tempted to do it, I worked out with Roger Clemens and Andy Pettit and Brian McNamee. Brian McNamee was the trainer that was in the middle of it. I actually have a picture of all of us over there. Just because it was such a crazy part of history. I used to live in Houston. And conversations that I had with Brian McNamee, I've told the story many times. I wrote about it for the Associated Press way back when the Mitchell Report came out, that I had a conversation with Brian McNamee, the trainer for Roger Clemens and Andy Pettit, about taking steroids. And I was coming off a bad year. A lot of other guys in the clubhouse were using it. I was watching velocities go up, and I was like, man, I think I'm going to do it. And he talked me out of it. At Roger Clemens' house, sitting in his gym, he talked me out of taking PEDs and steroids, and he said, man, you've never worked out. It was my first year I was training with him. It was like, you never worked out with me, you've never done the over-counter supplements that we use. He's like, trust me, let's give me a chance to train you the right way. Let's see what kind of results that we could get. And it was one of those things that had happened at the time. This is way before Mitchell Report, and it was kind of wild what ended up happening afterwards. I was playing in Japan when the Mitchell Report came out, but I was home. It was the off season. He called me the day before, and he was like, hey man, I just want to let you know your name's going to be in the Mitchell Report. I was like, what? And he's like, well, they just wanted to know guys that were there and guys that were training. And I was like, holy crap. And so I ended up being in the middle of that story a little bit more than I probably wanted to. But at the end of the day, the thing that makes me the most mad, I think, there's a handful of things, but it's the idea of competing and the mental edge that guys had. They had the physical edge. We know that, right? But can you imagine there's something physical you have to do, and you've taken a shortcut that's going to make you better than everybody else, and what that does to your psyche? The issue with my career is the inconsistencies that I had were not because I didn't have good enough stuff. I had plenty of stuff. I've had people look at me and go, man, how come you didn't have a better career? Or how come you haven't been better even in the middle of it? Your stuff's too good, whatever, it's fine. But there's a mental component to this game that's really important. And if you can get past that and feel like, man, your confidence is just, oozing. Well, I think steroids did that for a lot of guys, and they gained a huge advantage. And then I also saw other guys losing jobs to players that were cheating.
Yeah.
And guys that were trying to hang, right? And not so much even the biggest names, right? There was guys, I remember a utility guy was kind of competing with another one and came to me one day just distraught. It's like, man, what am I supposed to do? He's like, I know this guy's cheating. You know, we're similar. We play multiple positions. All of a sudden now he's hitting 12 home runs a year and I'm hitting 2. And I'm going to lose my job to him. And he did. It's those kinds of things from the guys that, you know, decided to cheat. Again, I gave it some serious consideration and ultimately I didn't do it. And so if I did, I wouldn't even be able to say this. But that's the stuff that makes me mad. The records that have been stolen from us, the jobs that were stolen from us, and then the advantage that players had that I was facing in the middle of that, in a much better, not just physical, but mental place than I was when we were competing because they cheated.
All right. We'll go around the horn one more time. We're really respectful of your time. Really appreciate you coming on. We'll start with Jose. Jose, is there maybe one more thing you want to kind of get off your chest?
Good. I have something I wanted to ask you, actually. There's a post you made on X quoting a tweet asking what your favorite photo from the 2025 season is. And you posted a photo of you in the broadcast booth with Wiley Ballard. Mm-hmm. There's a pizza slice on the ground. And I think there's like a bite or two eaten.
Oh, yeah, there was.
Can you give us the context behind that photo? What makes it your favorite one from the season?
Yeah, and I don't know if it was my favorite one, but I was just looking for one to share to have a little fun. With Wiley, I think, you know, probably Gimme Ronald's follow-through on the home run that he hit and the first pitch that he saw when he came back might have been my favorite thing I saw last year. But so Wiley was doing play-by-play. If you remember, he had a run of 6 games last year. Brandon went to take care of some family stuff. So Wiley stepped in leading into the All-Star break, the series against the Athletics, and then that one was in St. Louis. And I look over and I felt like I was in his college dorm room. I mean, it was and now there because Brandon and Wiley from this standpoint are complete opposites. Brandon is as neat gets. Everything is tidy, and there was just crap everywhere, all over the place on his side, on the floor, on his desk, and I don't care. It's on his side, but I just had a little fun with it. And he had pizza that he was eating, but then he put it on the floor. His sweatshirt was on the floor. I think that the wheel of his chair might have been over his sweatshirt. I think it's actually this one that we had for the group that we had gotten made. So it's just more about how fun it was to work with Wiley again. It was really cool for me to be there for him. He had the one game in Milwaukee where he did play-by-play, and then he had those 6. Those were his first big league games. So it was an honor for me to be his analyst, and when he got that first opportunity to have a run doing play-by-play, you always kind of remember I did a little bit of play-by-play for Fox and for the Rangers, and I remember the very first game I did and did it with Eric Karros, and it always means something. So it was a little bit of fun, but also a really fun moment as well.
Ryan?
CJ, do you have any holiday traditions in your household?
Good question.
Not really. It's just starting to get a little bit of a sad time, man, with the kids getting older. I have one out of the house, one in grad school, and one that's getting ready to go to college next year, so things have slowed down a little bit. Christmas is probably less than Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving we've been doing pretty big the last few years, which I love. We have a bunch of people come into town, which has been cool, but not necessarily. We had one for a while. Again, I grew up in the Northeast. I went to high school actually in New Jersey, and a buddy of mine, a teammate of mine, ended up living down here as well. And so for probably about 8 or 9 years, because we're all so far away from family, we would go find a hibachi dinner for Christmas Eve. So because he had 3 kids, we had 3 kids, and so the 10 of us would get together, and every Christmas Eve, we'd end up having a hibachi steak dinner somewhere, which was always kind of fun, but same thing, kids get older, start to move away, and so that one died off. I think last year was the first year we didn't do it. So it's pretty simple. We love being home and hanging out, and it's always nice when all the kids are here.
Mr. Ben?
What do you expect is a reasonable, or what do you think is a reasonable expectation for the Braves going into 2026? How much better do you think they'll be than 2025?
So the jumping off point's in a really good spot, right? Because of the way last year went. And so it could be a really big plus, 12 wins maybe compared to a year ago. I've been very encouraged by what's going on in the rest of the division, at least as it stands right now. The disaster in Queens is just a super fun thing to watch. The Phillies signing back Kyle Schwarber, while that's a big deal and he's going to be a pain, I think it puts them in a little bit of a bind, though, too. I think they were in a weird spot because, like we just talked about earlier, they've completely locked up their DH spot. And if you remember, I think it was last year or 2 years ago, I think it was last year, there was times where Bryce Harper could only hit. Remember, he was dealing with the elbow situation, but he couldn't DH because you had Kyle Schwarber there, right? So I think as they get a little bit older, I'm encouraged, and I don't wish guys to play bad or get hurt, but that team's getting a little older, and they got some question marks. Zach Wheeler with that kind of scary surgery that he had to have is a big question mark. Aaron Nola did not look particularly good last year. It's a big question mark for them, and they got to figure out their outfield. They basically said they're going to get rid of Nick Castellanos, and Dave Dombrowski's going to be aggressive. He's not afraid to throw big money at problems, and I think he's the opposite of Alex, where he's not worried about sometimes a few years down the road, like we'll deal with it then. So that means every once in a while they get a little over aggressive. But I like the way things are shaping up so far. The Braves certainly in our division have had the best offseason, and I think that will continue. Quite honestly, assuming health is always the big kind of wild card, but this should be a division-winning team again next year.
So what I'm hearing is the Fish are going to finish.
I've got
second,
a two-parter.
Right? You're saying the Mets are going to finish dead
Yes.
last, right?
Yeah.
Phillies
Yeah.
maybe a game or two better, and then the Fish are going to be right there.
Can you imagine? if it went that bad? I mean, that drama right now in Queens is crazy. I will say this.
Tough scene.
Here's the thing, man. Here's the thing that sticks out to me. I've talked about a lot on our radio show. Brandon Nimmo, it was up to him. He completely had control of whether or not he was getting traded. And he's kind of Mr. Met. He was building a house in Port St. Lucie. And when they came to him with an opportunity to leave, he said, okay. Like that was a red flag for me.
For the
and
Mets.
so they make that. And then Pete Alonso at the end of the year, if you remember. So 2 years ago, they bring in Soto. I think he had a little bit of that FOMO going, like he was the guy. They give all the money to Soto. He tried to make it work, and he stuck around, and he got himself a deal with some flexibility. But not nearly the length of deal that he wanted, but I think he really wanted to be a Met again. This year, the season comes to an end, and a reporter asked him about his opt-out, and he, without hesitation, said, I'm opting out. Like, he didn't leave it up for interpretation. And it wasn't like, let me think about it. Let me get home with my family. He's like, nope, I'm opting out. And I was like, oh, he's gone. And they couldn't offer him 5 years anyway because Juan Soto's got a DH sooner or later. And so that, and then obviously what we saw with Edwin Diaz. I think the Mets probably could have, I think they got actually out-negotiated there. They probably could have matched the offer, but Andrew Friedman basically made it sound like, hey, you got to take it now or we're done. And he was okay leaving. That's three pretty big pieces that were okay leaving. So there's some drama going on right now in Queens.
Yeah, that doesn't spell great inner workings for the Mets right there when you lose your cornerstone first baseman.
No, but I'm okay with it.
Yeah,
I'm cool with it. Yeah, I don't mind it one bit.
I've got a two-parter, so actually in a month to the day we will have Brandon back on. Is there anything you would like for us to tell him?
Tell him, yeah. So I was just thinking today, man, I got to get in touch with him and Wiley. He gets so busy with basketball to try not to bother him too much. You said a month from today or a month from tomorrow?
Yep, the 15th of January.
His birthday's next week, so it would be too late to wish him a happy birthday. You could play the game that Ryan Spielbergs and I play on radio, which is who can say Happy New Year the latest in the year. So you could have that opportunity to kind of do. It's always a challenge. Like whenever we have a guest on, we see who has the ball. So like say it February 1st, January 15th is still kind of pushing it a little bit. Brandon is fantastic, man. I am so incredibly lucky to work with him. So I will have talked to him for sure, and probably have had a meal with him before you guys will see him. But you can just tell him I said I miss him.
There you go.
Wholesome.
Interesting nugget, too. The episode that we're recording right now is going out tomorrow, and it'll be a year to the day, I believe, of the first time you came on the show.
So I saw that because I went back to look to see. I couldn't remember if you would email me the link or if you put it in the DM, and I saw you put it in the DM, so I scrolled back. That's when I was scrolling back up to see. And I was like, oh, that was the 13th that we taped this last year.
I kind of did.
Turned into our own little December tradition. Yeah, I've never been, but I know what it is, yeah.
Okay.
The one in Battery?
In general,
Yeah.
former teammate, current Brave.
All right, so one player for my career that I want to take with me in an escape room, and one current Brave. All right, let me go current Brave first. Probably Spencer Strider, because he'll be
figure.
competitive, but he also won't get emotional about it. Like, he's not going to lose his crap. Like, he's going to stay locked in. Now, I say that, and he went to Clemson. You know, Mike Yastrzemski's a Vanderbilt guy. And that was the other thing I gave him a little bit of a hard time about, because it's Tony Manzolino, Antoine Richardson, all Vandy guys. So we'll have to figure out how we tolerate that talk for an entire year. But I'm going to stay. I probably should have said Yaz, but I haven't gotten to know him as well. And I just think Spencer Strider will remain calm, cool, and collective and incredibly competitive to be able to get it done. And now, and it's not always about who has the most book smarts, right? I mean, who's maybe the most clever. I've played with a lot of smart guys over my career. Give me Brad Lidge, Notre Dame, great closer. Sorry, I know it was with the Phillies, but we
Interesting.
played together with the Astros, actually just in the minor leagues, and then we worked together for a little while in radio. So Brad, these days, he actually stepped away from our radio show last year because he's a huge archaeology guy, and he like leads expeditions in Italy. So there's there's times where we have this group chat of a bunch of the Loud Outs guys and guys from MLB Network Radio. Every once in a while, we'll hear something from him, and he's the guy like a shovel in the dirt somewhere in the middle of Europe. So he's a fascinating guy. He's working on his master's now. I think it's his he might be working on his doctorate. But he's up there as one of the smarter guys that I play with. Mike Messina maybe as well. Stanford, he was super smart. I'm assuming smarts is where I want to go. I think he could probably get us out of there pretty quick also.
Brad Lidge, I know he had a phenomenal career. He was a great closer for many years. But the only image I can see of Brad Lidge is turning around in the 2005 NLCS and just watching Albert Pujols go absolutely mammo off the hill onto the train tracks at Minute Maid. That's the only visual I still have of Brad Lidge. It was 2005.
Somebody said to him, I don't know if they. That sounds right. And I can't remember. And then, of course, he had the perfect season where he did not blow a single save.
Yes.
When they won it, what was that, 2009 in Philly? But I think I wasn't there at the time, but I think when that happened, if I'm not mistaken, they ended up then maybe going to St. Louis after. There was a team flight, and I think it was that night. And the story goes, and I can't remember which player said it, but they were up in the air, and one of the teammates was looking out the window. And goes, hey, Lidgy, I think I just saw Pujols' ball go by. I don't remember who it was. Yeah.
And like I said, I know Brad
Lidge
Lidge had a phenomenal career,
That's
and
fantastic.
I hated when he was with the Phillies because he diced up the Braves whenever he pitched against them. But that's always great to remember a good Albert Pujols tank job.
And that's not even your favorite. But here's the thing, right? That's not even your favorite train track homer. I mean, it's not. I mean,
yeah. I mean, Jorge Soler.
There's nothing better. I mean,
21.
that Jorge Soler homer was the greatest. Outside of what I saw in the ALCS when I was covering the Rangers and when they beat the Astros, and the Astros are in the middle of a lot of this because when you're calling games to the Rangers, they're a very unlikable team. So watching the Rangers beat them up in the CS, after that was crazy CS where every game was won on the road, but that moment was so incredible, man. That Soler homer, watching it as a fan, and at that point I'm working for the Rangers, but I'm still pulling for the Braves. Yeah. But also rooting against the Astros, right? So it all kind of worked perfectly. Was just an amazing moment. I love that so much.
I remember me and my wife were in Helen, and I don't know if you know where Helen's at, but it's North Georgia.
I've been there. I've been water tubing there.
There you go. It's a great place. But we were there, and
we were in that cold water.
We were at one of the bars in Helen, and I'd had a few too many at that point. But I remember seeing Jorge Soler's home, and I just started crying. I'm like, I'm finally going to be able to see a World Series. Never seen it, and it was just great.
Yeah.
Braves obviously ended up winning, but that was great.
It was awesome.
All right, I will try to stop it here. Hopefully my computer does not bug out on me. CJ, we really appreciate it. Always a pleasure to have you come on.
Yeah, my pleasure, guys. Always fun to talk.
Thank you, CJ.
Thank you.
All right, see y'all.
All right, that was CJ. Big shout out. Once again, love having him come on. One of the best minds to just sit and talk some ball with. Pretty intellectual about the game, and his takes are pretty good too. Obviously, it helps that he's the color guy for the Braves. So yeah, sorry my internet absolutely shit on me, but I believe y'all probably held down the fort pretty good. I hope.
We did.
Attempted.
Yeah, man. Had to fill in some of that space while your internet was shitting the bed, but it's all good.
In game 7 of the World Series, I might add there, Jeb.
Yeah, I mean, pulled a bin right there with the shitty internet. Pulled a bin.
Whoa! My internet's just fine nowadays. All right.
Now it is.
Yeah, nowadays. Yeah, now it is.
Y'all need to invest in some computers.
I'm trying, brother. As soon as I can afford it, I will. Dropping $20,000 on a brand new house leaves me with nothing.
Shit, I would imagine.
Yeah. I'm gonna start with Jose. Jose, what was something like one takeaway that you kind of liked or thought of that stuck out during this interview?
I mean, for me, it was just how CJ is very detail oriented about everything. When it comes to his radio show, he already had Yastrzemski on it. He already asked him some incredible questions, made it very, very easy to get to know him and get familiar with him before you even see him in a Braves uniform. Just things like that, like that deep knowledge that he has, and that you're able to pick his brain at pretty much anything, and he'll tell you something interesting that you didn't know. Just how detail oriented he is was really, really awesome.
Yeah. Ryan, something that stuck out from the interview?
What about you, Ryan?
Good Jesus, Jeb. What stood out to me is Brad Lidge, the archaeologist.
Yeah.
Brad Lidge, the archaeologist. I would have never. You could have told me, given me 1,000 choices of what he was doing and 1,000 guesses. I would have never picked archaeology. That's fun. That was a fun little Twizzler like that.
Yeah, I might have guessed
Honestly,
archaeology,
his
but
perspective too on the steroid era.
yes. I was going to say I might have guessed archaeology, but it would have absolutely been just a throwaway guess, and it would have just been like, "There's no way he's actually doing this now." It just said archaeology for the shits and gigs. But yeah, the steroid era, all the info and obviously his feelings on players from that era kind of gives you an idea of where the majority of guys are nowadays, especially the guys who played during that era. Because I mean, CJ was in the 90s into the 2000s, which is literally the heart of the steroid era, and just to get firsthand perspective of what he went through and what his ideas were and on that was pretty refreshing and pretty nice to hear.
Yeah. Obviously, I will be going back and listening to this for all the shit that I missed because of my Wi-Fi. But yeah, make sure y'all like, comment, subscribe, share it. We really appreciate everybody. Appreciate the follows. Appreciate our fan base. We love y'all. And I'm going to go take a blowtorch to my router. And we will see y'all in the next one. Peace.
Landed right on the shoulder.
Hawk tour.
Let's do it again.